And we are live in South Alabama Homeschooling. My name is Erin Wainwright. I'm the admin of this group. If you haven't seen me, here I am. And I have Will Estrada, who is our new Alabama rep with HSLDA. I know several of you have been keeping up with our latest issues with the text messaging and the Mobile County Public School System. Mr. Estrada was fantastic in helping us get that resolved. Um, so very excited to have him here and have him on board. He's been very enthusiastic, but I wanted to introduce him and allow him to introduce himself to all of you. So, Mr. Estrada, Will, do you mind introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up where you are today.
Well, Erin, thank you so much for the opportunity to come on and speak to all of you in Alabama. I'll start with a little bit about myself and then what I'm doing with Homeschool Legal Defense. So I'm a homeschool graduate. I'm the oldest of 8 kids and started being homeschooled in New York just about 2 years after the homeschool law went into effect. My dad spent 37 years as a public school educator. My mom had a career at IBM and gave it up to stay home to homeschool me and my 7 younger siblings. And really, Erin, right from the outset, my parents, because of their faith in God, they said, we don't really want to do the public schools. And think about the public schools in the 80s and 90s. Now you look at what's going on in some of the public schools, and it's really sad. But even back at that time, they said we want to homeschool our kids because of our faith in God. And so grew up being homeschooled, graduated in Pennsylvania. As you know, New York and Pennsylvania have probably two of the strictest homeschool laws in the nation. And both of those were where my siblings and I were homeschooled. And the funny thing is, I'm kind of a nerdy homeschool graduate, but growing up, I remember getting the Court Report, which is the magazine that Homeschool Legal Defense sends out. And I would read it cover to cover, and I would say, I want to be a lawyer for several reasons, because you can have books like the books that you have behind you. Of course, anyone can have books. You don't have to be a lawyer to have books. But, this is little 10-year-old Will Estrada thinking that you need to have the money to buy lots of books, and so you should be a lawyer. And then I also, though, really wanted to help people, and I would read the stories of Mike Farris and the other lawyers at HSLDA, and I loved how they would come and represent homeschool moms and homeschool dads and kids. And I said, that sounds exciting. And so after graduation from high school, I actually took the CLEP tests. I CLEP'd out of really undergrad, actually, and went straight into law school upon graduation from high school. California has a really flexible law school program, law. And so I went to a California law school, passed the bar exam, and today I'm an attorney. Kind of rewinding a little bit, in 2004, while I was still in law school, I was hired by Homeschool Legal Defense, then attorney Scott Woodruff, to be a legal assistant. And so 2004, I started helping homeschoolers. I finished law school. And when I became an attorney in 2008, then I became one of the HSLDA staff attorneys and ended up doing all the federal lobbying for Homeschool Legal Defense. So I would be on Capitol Hill representing homeschoolers. We did work on military enlistment, eligibility for higher education and federal student aid, just a lot of fun activities. And then in 2018, after 14 years at Homeschool Legal Defense, I resigned from my position and said goodbye to everyone and became a career bureaucrat at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And that was something I always said I would never do, become a bureaucrat, but it was a really exciting opportunity. I went in at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in the Office for Civil Rights, worked through the pandemic, did a lot of conscience and religious freedom work, and then in 2021 left the federal government, did a little bit of other things. I worked at Parental Rights Foundation, and then just this past summer, in July of 2023, I came back to Homeschool Legal Defense and came on staff as senior counsel and over a bunch of states: California, Pennsylvania, and near and dear to my heart, Alabama. So that's kind of the circuitous story of how I was at Homeschool Legal Defense for 14 years and then just came back. But I'm thrilled to be doing not the federal work, but the state work, working on legislation, working with people like you, Erin, and being able to not, hobnob with members of Congress and their staff, but work with actual moms and dads and homeschool students and graduates, which is a passion of mine and near and dear to my heart. My wife and I homeschool our 2 kids, Dominic, who's 11, and Merrick, who's age 6. And so my wife's a homeschool graduate as well. And so we were both homeschooled and now homeschooling our kids, and just love this incredible educational option for our kids.
It's been really neat to start seeing the second generation and third generation homeschoolers and homeschool families coming along. I just had a grandbaby. I just got my
Congratulations,
first
Erin.
grandbaby this year, and they plan to homeschool him. So my daughter graduated homeschooling, and they plan to homeschool him. So it's been really fun for me to see these second and third generation homeschool families. I promised you no gotcha question, so I hope this isn't one. Well,
Oh,
you
it's a chance to stump the chump.
there
So
you go. There
go
we go.
for it.
Well, you mentioned the clepping, and I know that there are probably people watching who are like, "I'm sorry, what is that?" We have a couple people in the group who talk about it sometimes, but we don't really hear about that as much. Is that still something that's fairly prevalent and easy to do, or
So the college level examination program, it really depends on the college. Not all colleges will accept it. It's a little bit different, but the AP exams, advanced placement, they're a college board exam. Most people are familiar with the PSAT and the SAT, but another college board exam is the advanced placement AP tests, and a lot more colleges will accept those. And so many homeschoolers will do the AP classes, then take the AP test, and they'll knock out college credit while they're going through high school. CLEP is something generally you take after high school graduation. And depending on the college or university, some of them will accept a few CLEP tests, some of them will accept a lot. The law school I went to, Oak Brook College of Law, they would completely cover your first 2 years of college. California only requires 2 years of undergrad to be able to go to law school. So for me, it was a really unique opportunity. 8 kids growing up in Pennsylvania, dad being a public school teacher and mom staying at home. We didn't have a ton of money. And even back in 2001, when I graduated from high school, I was like, well, I don't really want to have student debt. So I was looking at options. So I always tell people it may not work for you, but look at those options. There's nothing wrong with going, to even taking out student loans if you need them and going to a 4-year college or a community college. But it's another option that's out there. And what are we if we're not, as homeschoolers, people who look at kind of those non-traditional options for education? And really, it may work for you. So check out CLEP tests. A lot's going to depend on your preferred college or university if they will accept them, however.
I'm sort of veering off track a little here, but
No, it's good.
HSLDA, one of the things I like to try and make sure people know is it's a little bit more than just legal defense. Y'all do have help for parents with special needs kids, resources, and things like that, and high school counselors. I've actually spoken to one of your high school counselors. We have an interview with them on our YouTube channel. Is this something that you could bring to if you're a member and you went to the high school counselor, this was something they would understand and be able to kind of talk you through? This would be something.
Oh, absolutely. And Erin, I'm so glad you touched on that, because when Homeschool Legal Defense was founded in 1983, 40 years ago, it was literally just lawyers and legal assistants helping represent homeschoolers. And as sometimes we take for granted the freedom that we have in the United States. And I've been able to work with the Romica family, German homeschoolers. I mean, it's pretty unique in America, not just the freedom that we have for homeschooling, but also the prevalence of homeschooling. It's not something you see in all around the world. But as homeschooling has grown and moved from illegal to legal to really kind of now post-COVID is mainstream, HSLDA has provided additional programs to help and support homeschoolers. So we have the high school consultants, we have special needs consultants, we have early years consultants, and they'll walk you through almost like a guidance counselor sort of thing. They'll walk you through how do you do a transcript, what are some other options you can be thinking about. Even if you're not an HSLDA member, there's a lot of options and information on our webpage that the high school consultants have put up there. Interviews like you mentioned, Erin. So check them out. If you're a member, give us a call. If you're not a member, there's still a ton of information that you can find on the HSLDA webpage, both if you're having a struggling learner or a child with special needs, or of course, thinking about high school and beyond.
Yeah, I know that's been a big thing. We get a lot of questions, a lot of panic when it comes to high school. And we're always like, it's not that scary. I swear it's not scary. But inevitably, there's always panic that sets in when it comes to high
And
school.
Erin, I always remind people that Especially now, colleges and universities, they're looking for those students who are going to go and represent their college and university well. And I've talked to so many college admissions officers who say, we want the homeschoolers because they know how academically talented they are, how they're self-starters, how they're, not going to need those remedial classes that sadly so many of the graduates of public schools have been having. So there's a lot of competition for the students coming from rigorous private schools and from homeschools. So keep your chin up as a homeschool parent. That parent issued transcript and parent issued diploma marks your student as a high school graduate. And there's a lot of colleges and universities that are aggressively recruiting homeschoolers.
That's what we're hearing locally too. So that is definitely something I'm hearing as well. I forgot to say at the beginning of this, and I do want to say now that if y'all have questions while we're doing this, this is live at the moment. It will be recorded and played back. So if you're listening to the recording, if you're live right now and you want to ask questions, go ahead and post them in the comment section. We'll get them answered by Will. He'll kind of answer them as we go. We'll work them in. If this is a recording and you're watching it as a recording, tag me and question in the post, in the comment, and I will get you connected with Will, or if I can answer the question, or I will ask him if he can answer the question real quick too. So that's one way to do it. So feel free to ask questions while we're doing this, especially with what we're going to go ahead and move into, which is in Alabama, we know that there's been some confusion and some misunderstandings on what exactly is required to make sure that your student is legally covered. So I know that you mentioned earlier that you worked with the military. So one of the big things is the military does accept our high school diplomas. Absolutely. It's fantastic. They can join any branch of the military, and we're seeing it happen all the time. However, one of the big things is, from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the stipulation is that you must follow the rules and regulations of your state. So if you're not following the rules and regulations, kind of crossing your T's, dotting your I's of the state that you're in, it could hinder things like that, future employment, things like that. So it's kind of a beyond high school. We definitely want to make sure we're doing the right thing. So if you could tell us where HSLDA stands on this, what we need to be doing and making sure that we are legally covered, and so our children don't miss out on opportunities in the future.
That's a great way to segue into that, Erin. And I'm going to give a quick, 10,000-foot summary of the Alabama law, and then I'm sure we'll have people who have questions. And Erin, I can dive much closer into some of that. But as all of our listeners know and viewers know, there are basically three main options under which you can educate your children at home in Alabama. And I always remind people, we talk about homeschooling, but Alabama technically doesn't have a homeschool law. You have a home education under private education in the code. And for starters, you want to go to Alabama Code section 16-28-1. That has two of the three options, probably the two most popular options. It's got your private school option, that's 16-28-1, paragraph 1. And then you have your church school option, which is 16-28-1, paragraph 2. And I always remind people, when you're talking about church schools, even though the code says church, the First Amendment would make it very clear that it's not just a church, synagogue, a mosque, a religious entity can avail itself of that. So it's not just Christian churches, for example. So let's just real quick go through those three and in a little bit more unpack them. Church school is the oldest and probably most well-known option under which you can educate your children at home. We talked about the statute. And essentially, if you want to get involved in a church school, find one and they'll walk you through what you do. All of them have slightly different sort of rules, but in principle, you're going to notify the school district that you're operating as a church school using the form that the church school will give you. The principal teacher then of the church school, the administrator, they're going to do most of the liaising with the school district. And so you're going to work with them. Some church schools have a bit more requirements. Others have less requirements. But I always say, talk to your administrator of your church school, because that's where you're going to get a lot of the information. Second option, and this is a more recent one, it was created by a tweak in the Alabama code, and this is creating a private school in your own home. Now, I think it's it's well known that you have this option. And a lot of the debate that I hear in Alabama, and Erin, as you've alluded to, is do you need to let the school district know that you are operating as a private school in your home? And the position of HSLDA is that that's what the statute requires. Now, I'm a homeschool graduate. I love the freedom that homeschooling has. And so whenever I'm talking to parents, I say, well, my job is to tell you what our understanding of the law is, and then you are the parent. We respect you. You make that decision. But I'm gonna kind of walk through just real quick why I believe that the law says that if you are a home educator operating a private school in your home, that you do have to do the annual attendance information. And the statute that I always cite people to is actually a really good statute that was put in the Alabama Code. It's called Autonomy of Non-Public Schools. You can find it in Alabama Code section 16 1 11.1. So it's going to look like 16 and then a bunch of ones. And it was a finding. And remember, whenever there's kind of a question of a statutory interpretation, the courts are going to look at the holistic part of the code to try to discern what the legislature was intending. They're not going to necessarily look at statements made on the floor. They're going to look at what is in the actual Alabama Code. And so Alabama Code section 16 1 11.1, autonomy of non-public schools. The legislature finds and declares all of the following. And I'm just going to read a few of these sentences because they're so good. Paragraph 1, that the parent or guardian in Alabama has a constitutional right to choose the type of K-12 education that is best for his or her child, whether public or non-public, religious or non-religious, and including home-based education. And then paragraph 2, that many parents choose to homeschool or enroll their children in elementary and secondary non-public schools, including private, church, parochial, or religious schools that are not subject to state regulation and do not receive state or federal funds. And now paragraph 3, the money quote, that other than reporting on the enrollment of students, these non-public K-12 schools have been primarily exempt from state regulation and have only been required by state law to report the enrollment of students. And so when you go back to some of the private school statute, and some of the sections there, I think because of this autonomy of non-public schools section in the code, it's very clear that you don't need to notify the school district about things. You don't need to test. You don't need to meet any of the zoning or fire code, but you do have to do the attendance information. And that's why Homeschool Legal Defense and a lot of the organizations in Alabama will recommend, if you are, again, not if you're church school, not if you're private tutor, but if you are operating as a home-based private school, you're declaring yourself as a private school, do go ahead and notify the local school district every year about the time that the public schools start, the attendance information in your school. It's really basic. It's the name, attendance information. We have some forms on our HSLDA page that make it really easy, and that's essentially it. In addition to, I think, the benefit that you mentioned, Erin, of if you ever have problems getting into a cosmetology school, that's where actually most of the problems homeschoolers run into. I always joke, you can get into Harvard, but you have trouble getting into the cosmetology schools. Or if you're having trouble enlisting in the military or getting into a military service academy, we can send a letter saying you complied with the law in your state and the Alabama law, and get that letter and also have that documentation of those attendance informations that were filed. And then just so I cover everything, there's also the private tutor option, which is another great option, but you do have to be an Alabama certified teacher under that one. So that's kind of the summary. And then Erin, maybe other people have questions or you want to dive into a little bit more of that for more detail.
No, that's great. I was going to say that we have on our website, southalabamahomeschooling.com, we actually have a link directly to the part of the law. And so you can look up the statutes that he quotes from that link. We link directly to it, so you can go read them for yourself. It's not edited. It is the state website. So, but you can look up the statutes that he referred to if you want to look those up and double check. We have had some issues um, with people who haven't filed any paperwork ending up in front of judges. I've had several panicked phone calls myself from people in tears. A sheriff showed up at my door. What do I do? And so, you know, and my first advice is always to call y'all. I'm not a lawyer. That's why I just think it's so important that people know. I know people are being told that y'all don't exist in our state, and that's such a terrifying thing because if you need help, these are the people who know how to help in homeschooling. You just get some random lawyer from, wherever, they're not as familiar with homeschool law, and they might not be able to help as much. But yeah, so the post graduation stuff is very important. If you have a family member that's not on board with you homeschooling, if you have a neighbor that is nosy and going to wonder why your kids are out playing at 1 in the afternoon, that's where you run into issues. We don't see a whole lot of the schools coming after people like they've got too much on their plate. But what we see is kind of more of an internal family kind of a thing. So, you
Yeah.
know, it's such a simple form that we link you to a form, the private school enrollment form for the state of Alabama on our website. It's one sheet, and it's like child's name, address, and birthday. I think that's it.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so that's one we recommend. Some of the local county schools are sending out their own
I always say
stuff.
use your form. I think your form is the best, and that's a great reminder, Aaron. I've probably helped about 6 or 7 Alabama families in the past few months where there was an educational neglect or truancy charge filed against them. When they're part of a church school, the school district or the truant officer or the social worker can just call the church school and they say, "Yep, this is a student," and then it makes everything go away. But for the families who are operating as a private school, if they don't file that attendance information, then the truant officer shows up. And so some families, maybe they say, you know what, we don't mind the truant officer showing up. We've got the information. We'll hire a lawyer or do what it takes and get rid of it. But I know for myself and my wife, we don't want to have government officials showing up at
Right.
our door. And so I don't live in Alabama, but if I did, if I didn't use a church school, if there was none in my area and we declared it as a private school, then we would just send in our attendance information. So there'd be no question about it. And the interesting thing is when we've had these half dozen or so cases, we talked to the family, they sent in their attendance information and it completely made everything go away. So it is just kind of that thought I have of, well, I think it is required by the law. So go ahead and do it proactively so you don't have to have that scary knock on the door.
Yeah, and what I've seen a lot of is you go to the first court date that they require, and they love to make you go to a second court date. They tend to throw it out by the second court date, but they want to
Homeschool
make you
moms and dads,
come.
we got better things to do with our time than show up
Exactly.
at court dates. So that's my 2 cents. I've
Exactly.
talked to I've talked to many families in Alabama, and I've always said, call me at HSLDA if you want to talk through it. I've probably talked to about 20 or 30 people, and they were like, there's no need to do anything. And I walked them through the statutes. And at the end, they said, I didn't know about that. That kind of makes sense when you have it there. I'm going to mull it over. And that's all I ask. Just look at the statute. And, I trust homeschool parents. I love freedom. You've got a great law in Alabama. But I always try and say, avoid that knock on the door so you can focus on having that your home as a safe place for your kids and being able to educate your children in peace.
Well, and one of the things I like to remind people, especially new homeschoolers that aren't as familiar, because we'll have people come in and they'll want to talk to the homeschool, head of homeschool. There's no school system. It's you. So it doesn't, I'm not personally affected if you don't send in the paperwork because there's not a system in place it's very hard to unlearn the public school mindset sometimes when you first start homeschooling. So, it is you, it's on you. So, just keep that in mind. So make your decisions, but there isn't going to be a system that's going to come in and kind of that's why we have so much freedom that we absolutely love. Are we watching anything currently legislatively? Is there anything that we need to be on top of and be paying attention to?
Great question, Aaron. So, a few other exciting things about Alabama is in the last legislative session. So, this spring in 2023, Representative Kenneth Pascal's parental rights bill went into effect. So, there's strong protections for religious freedom in the Alabama Constitution. There's now a strong parental rights protection in the Alabama Code. We were very, very happy to see that. What we are hearing, however, is that there'll be some education savings accounts, ESA bills coming through. And I realize that the homeschool community, there are homeschoolers who like those bills and say, we're paying our taxes, property taxes, we're not using the public school. What is some way we can get help? I realize that there are homeschoolers who say, you know what, we don't want with government shekels come government shackles. We don't want any of this money coming through. I deeply respect where the homeschoolers are on all of those. And so I've been reminding legislators, I've been reminding people with other organizations, as I say, talk to the Alabama homeschoolers, because HSLDA is going to defer to what you guys have. And I realize that there's a bunch of organizations in Alabama. There are numerous organizations. I think it is a sign of the health of the homeschool or home education, because there's no homeschool statute, the home education community in Alabama, that homeschooling has grown so significantly that there are multiple organizations. So I've been putting state legislators in touch with you, Aaron, and with the other representatives from different groups. And I'm saying, you got to make all the private educators, all the homeschoolers happy on this. And then HSLDA will come in and will assist with where the homeschoolers are. And I think the homeschoolers are pretty consistently saying, we want there to be something so that parents have options if their kids are stuck in failing public schools, but we want to make sure that homeschool freedom is not threatened. And that's incredibly, incredibly important. So we're having those conversations. I respect you all in the Alabama homeschooling community, you, Aaron, and the others. And I am perfectly happy to sit back, wait for you guys to make your recommendation. And then Aaron, HSLDA will go on out. And if you say there's a bill that is going to threaten homeschool freedom, we will come out and we will join shoulder to shoulder with you in defeating that bill.
Well, I'm staying on top of the things too. And when something does come up, HSLDA has been great in sending out alerts. I try to post as many links as I can to give people access to their legislators and how to get in contact with them and find out who their legislators are. But when HSLDA sends out a notification on their website, what do y'all call it?
An alert.
An alert.
Yes.
You can literally just put in your address and like they will give you kind of an option of things to say and email it out to you. So if we see anything come through that kind of is raising some alarm bells, I'll send you links. But HSLDA also now, can you? I'm a member, so I don't know. Can you sign up for the emails from HSLDA with these kind of alerts, even if you aren't a member?
I was actually going to say that, yes. So members, you get our emails, but non-members, if you're like, well, I just, for whatever reason, I'm not going to join right now, you can still go onto our webpage and sign up for our action alerts. And we've got tens of thousands of people in Alabama on our email list. And we have a system that our members have the funds that we get in. We're able to have it. It's a pretty cutting edge way. It links to all the state legislators and their staff, their emails and their phone numbers. And so it's really a one-click way that if any bills come through, and we can, through the strength of ordinary, or I always say extraordinary moms and dads, we can shut down the Capitol if they are doing something that either is well-intentioned but not wise, or is ill-intentioned to try and circumvent the great freedom that private educators and home educators have in Alabama. So encourage you, go to our webpage, hslda.org, sign up for the email alerts. And if a bill moves, you'll find out as an educator. I know, Aaron, you'll put us on the webpage, on social media, and it's a very, very helpful page. I've enjoyed watching it and kind of keeping on the pulse of Alabama home education, even though I'm headquartered with HSLDA's headquarters in Northern Virginia.
And those emails aren't all doom and gloom. So 2 years ago, a bunch of homeschoolers got a sweet potato bill passed and got it to where the state vegetable is a sweet potato, and HSLDA was on top of sharing that information. And so when homeschoolers are doing some good things, they also have contests. I know y'all have writing contests, I think photography contests, and things like that. So those are in their emails, so your child can participate in some of that fun stuff, have the opportunity to win some money or some things when you entered in those contests. So there's a lot of neat stuff besides just the, oh my gosh, scary bills might be coming through.
And
so
sometimes there's good bills too, and we need your help pushing it across the finish line. So
exactly.
It's a great way to be a well-informed citizen in the state of Alabama.
Perfect. Okay, I don't think we have any questions, and that's okay. I know this is kind of a rough time, but of course, this is my only free time too. But all the moms are probably finishing up dinner and things like that. But if we have any other questions, I will get in touch with you, Will. That's fine.
And people can call HSLDA 540-338-5600. Even if you're not a member, say that you saw Will Estrada on Aaron's podcast, and I'll take your call and talk with you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Thank y'all to everybody who came and joined us today. and we will talk again soon.
Erin, can I hit one more thing real quick?
Oh, yep.
The final thing I want to remind Alabama home educators is that Alabama has a great law. We call it the Public College Anti-Discrimination Act. It's codified at Alabama Code section 16-1-11.4. And it says simply, any provision of law to the contrary notwithstanding, no public 2-year or 4-year institution of higher education in the state may deny admission to or otherwise discriminate against an otherwise qualified student based on the consideration, whether in whole or in part, that the student attended, graduated from, or is enrolled in a non-public school, including private, church, parochial, and religious schools, or was homeschooled. So again, that's at Alabama Code section 16-1-11.4, one of the strongest diploma equality statutes in the nation. And so if there's a state school in Alabama that's asking questions of home educators diploma, give us a call and we'll get involved. It's a good part of the statute. I always tell other legislators in other states, you should follow Alabama's example here.
That's awesome. I like being on the forefront of some things. And I'll tell you, y'all really do come in handy. One of the other things that I forget to tell people about often is, we had some issues with a local college that was trying to give one of our families a hard time about entrance and just kind of trying to require things from them that they were absolutely not required to give, that kind of thing. And I got on the phone with them and I was able to talk to them, and he was being absolutely obstinate. It was like the vice president or somebody higher up, and I was like, but what you're saying isn't right. We're not legally required to do any of the things that you're asking, so she's not going to have these papers, these documents, these things. And he was not going to listen. I said, you know what? That's fine. I'm going to get you to put that in writing, and I'm going to forward it to our Homeschool Legal Defense Association so they can take a look at your standards and practices, and then we'll go from there. And almost on a dime, his whole tone changed. Everything kind of changed, and he backpedaled and said, "Well, let me make a few phone calls," and we were able to resolve the issue actually without even calling y'all, because it was more than just y'all give us more than just random homeschool mom. You kind of give us an army behind us that people will listen to in positions of power that we maybe don't have on our own. So
you're a lot more than a random homeschool mom, Erin, and we'll be putting out a story soon about some of the work you highlighted for us and helped us with in Mobile County Public Schools. So won't steal any of the thunder, but that'll be coming out soon and people can read about that.
Very exciting, very exciting. Okay, was there anything else?
That covers it.
Got it all covered? All right, thanks to you guys so much, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you, Erin.